The transmission arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through the deep space communication arrays with the desperation of a dying civilization. Commander Sarah Chun was halfway through her morning coffee when the priority alert flashed across her command console aboard the Orbital Defense Station Aegis Prime. What she heard in the next 30 minutes would change the course of galactic history forever. The voice belonged to Ambassador Kethril of the Zephyrian Confederacy, a proud aquatic species that had once dismissed humanity as violent primitives during first contact protocols 50 years earlier. Now, that same voice trembled with fear and humiliation as it spoke words no galactic power had ever uttered before. People of Earth, we come to you in our darkest hour. The Void Swarm has consumed 17 star systems in the Outer Rim. Our combined fleets, the greatest armadas in known space, have fallen before them like leaves in a storm. They adapt to our weapons, learn from our tactics, and turn our own technology against us. We who once looked down upon your species now beg for your aid. Humanity, please help us. The transmission cut to static, leaving Sarah staring at the holographic display showing the devastation spreading across the galactic map like a plague. Red dots marked consumed systems, their billions of inhabitants either dead or worse, converted into biomechanical horrors that served the swarm's incomprehensible hunger. Within hours, emergency sessions convened across Earth's governments. The Global Defense Council met in Geneva, where representatives from every nation gathered around a table that had hosted peace treaties and trade agreements, but never a decision that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, the grizzled veteran who had commanded humanity's first interstellar warship, stood before the assembly with a gravity that silenced even the most vocal politicians. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear about what we're facing. The Void Swarm isn't just another hostile alien species. According to the data burst we received with the distress call, they're a collective intelligence that consumes organic matter and converts it into more of themselves. They've already destroyed civilizations that were spacefaring when our ancestors were still learning to make fire. The Brazilian representative leaned forward, her face pale. And they're asking us, humanity, to face this threat? We've barely had interstellar capability for half a century. Our fleets are nothing compared to the Galactic Alliance's armadas. That's exactly the point, Admiral Rodriguez replied, activating a holographic display that showed the evolution of human military technology. Every other species in the galaxy developed their warfare along predictable paths. Energy weapons, particle beams, quantum torpedoes. They fight with precision, efficiency, and honor. The swarm learned to counter all of that because it's logical, systematic. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But, humanity, we've never been logical warriors. We're chaotic, unpredictable, and willing to try anything that might work. While they perfected energy shields, we still use kinetic weapons. While they developed surgical strike tactics, we perfect the art of overwhelming firepower. They think like a hive mind. We think like barely controlled madmen who happen to love our fellow madmen enough to die for them. The session continued for 18 hours. Reports flooded in from across human space. Volunteer fleets assembling without official orders, shipyards working around the clock to retrofit civilian vessels with military hardware, and retired veterans coming out of retirement to cruise ships they'd sworn never to board again. In the asteroid belt, the mining vessel Honest Work transformed overnight from an industrial platform into a mobile fortress. Captain Elena Vasquez, a former Earth Navy tactical officer turned asteroid miner, welded surplus missile pods to her ship's hull while her crew of ex-military miners crafted improvised weapons from mining equipment. If we're going to die, she announced to her crew, we're going to take so many of those things with us that the rest will think twice about messing with humans. Meanwhile, on Mars, the legendary ship designer Dr. Yuki Tanaka emerged from retirement to oversee the most ambitious crash program in human history. The Prometheus project aimed to build a new class of warship in just 3 months. Vessels that would incorporate every lesson learned from decades of human conflict, combined with the best alien technology humanity had acquired through trade and other means. The other species build ships like works of art, Dr. Tanaka explained to her team of engineers, many of whom had volunteered their time without pay. Beautiful, elegant, efficient. We're going to build ships like weapons of war. Ugly, brutal, and absolutely terrifying to face in combat. The first ships of the line began taking shape in orbital shipyards that hadn't seen military construction since the last interplanetary conflict. But these weren't just warships. They were expressions of human ingenuity and stubbornness. The Ragnarok-class battleships combined Earth's traditional aircraft carrier concepts with alien anti-grav technology, creating mobile weapons platforms that could deploy fighter squadrons, missile swarms, and boarding parties simultaneously. As humanity mobilized, the galaxy washed with a mixture of hope and skepticism. The Altarian Republic's military commanders privately doubted that human forces could make any meaningful difference. The crystal-based Geodins calculated that human participation would add less than 3% to the combined firepower of the resistance. They couldn't have been more wrong. The first hint of what was coming arrived when humanity's diplomatic vessel Peaceful Intent docked with the Zephyrian flagship Current of Honor. Ambassador Chun, Sarah's younger sister, stepped aboard carrying data chips that contained humanity's proposed battle plans. The Zephyrian Admiral, a massive aquatic being whose tentacles betrayed his nervousness despite his attempts at stoicism, reviewed the plans with growing amazement. These tactics, Admiral Flowing Depth struggled to find words in the translator. They're completely insane. You propose ramming maneuvers, kamikaze attacks, and something you call acceptable losses that would horrify any civilized commander. Ambassador Chin smiled grimly. Admiral, you called us because civilized tactics weren't working. We're offering you something different. The question is, are you desperate enough to try it? The answer came in the form of a joint operation designation, Operation Broken Chain. For the first time in galactic history, human forces would integrate with alien fleets not as junior partners or token participants, but as the primary tactical command. The plan was to intercept the Void Swarm at the Kepler 442 system before they could reach the heavily populated core worlds. As the combined fleets assembled at the rally point, the sight was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Sleek Altarian cruisers with their elegant curves flew alongside human vessels that looked like they'd been assembled in scrapyards by angry mechanics. Zephyrian bioships, grown rather than built, shared formation space with converted human cargo haulers bristling with improvised weapons. Captain James Bull Morrison commanded the heavy cruiser Defiant, a ship that exemplified human military philosophy. Where alien vessels relied on energy shields and evasive maneuvers, the Defiant mounted 6 inches of composite armor and point defense systems designed to physically intercept incoming fire. His bridge crew was a mix of career military officers and civilian volunteers, including his own daughter serving as his communications officer. I never thought I'd see the day when the galaxy's greatest civilizations would turn to humanity for military leadership, his executive officer, Commander Park, observed as they reviewed the battle formations. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display, watching thousands of ships from dozens of species maneuvering into position. Commander, I don't think they're turning to us for leadership. They're turning to us for madness. The question is whether we're mad enough to pull this off. The answer would come soon enough. Long-range sensors detected the Void Swarm approaching the system's edge, a writhing mass of biological ships that defied conventional understanding. Each vessel in the swarm appeared to be a living creature, grown and shaped by an intelligence that viewed organic matter as raw material for its expansion. Initial reports from the scouting fleets painted a terrifying picture. The swarm ships weren't built, they were evolved. They could adapt their tactics in real time, modify their biological weapons during combat, and learn from every engagement. Worse, they seemed to feed on the destruction they caused, growing stronger with each victory. Admiral Rodriguez, now commanding the combined fleet from the massive human flagship Indomitable, received the final intelligence reports with characteristic calm. The ship itself was a testament to human engineering philosophy, not the largest or most elegant vessel in the fleet, but certainly the most heavily armed. Its hull bore scars from 3 previous conflicts, and its crew included veterans from every branch of human military service. All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez. His voice carried across the communication channels to thousands of vessels representing dozens of species. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending this will be easy, and I won't lie about our chances. The enemy we face has destroyed civilizations that were old when Earth was still cooling. But they've never faced humanity in full fury. He paused, looking at the tactical display that showed the approaching storm of biological ships. They expect us to fight like the others, with honor, precision, and civilized restraint. Instead, we're going to fight like humans. We're going to be unpredictable, ruthless, and absolutely relentless. We're going to show them why humanity survived ice ages, plagues, and our own worst impulses to reach the stars. The first wave of Void Swarm ships entered sensor range, and the battle for the galaxy's survival began. The enemy vessels moved with an alien grace, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that suggested communication or perhaps celebration. They had never encountered meaningful resistance, and their approach suggested they expected none now. They were about to learn why underestimating humanity had historically been a fatal mistake. Captain Vasquez, commanding her converted mining vessel Honest Work, studied the enemy formation through her improvised tactical systems. Her ship was positioned with the second wave, tasked with exploiting whatever chaos the first engagement created. Around her, the crew of miners-turned-warriors made final preparations with the same methodical efficiency they'd once used to extract rare minerals from asteroids. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's communications. "Today, we're not miners. We're not even really soldiers. Today, we're humans doing what humans do best, protecting our own and raising hell for anyone stupid enough to threaten them. Let's show these things why you don't mess with Earth." The opening salvo came from the Altarian fleet, their precisely calibrated energy weapons reaching across space to strike the leading edge of the swarm. The results were exactly as predicted, initially devastating, but rapidly diminishing as the swarm adapted. Within minutes, the same weapons that had destroyed the first wave of bioships were barely scratching their replacements. That's when the human fleet revealed its first surprise. Instead of advanced energy weapons, the opening human volley consisted of simple kinetic projectiles, essentially glorified bullets fired from magnetic accelerators. The swarm had no defenses against such primitive technology because no civilized species had used kinetic weapons for millennia. Hundreds of bioships, caught completely off guard, were shredded by streams of hypervelocity metal. But this was just the opening move in a game the aliens were about to learn they didn't understand. As the battle intensified, the true nature of human military doctrine became apparent. Where other species specialized, humanity generalized. Where others sought efficiency, humanity embraced redundancy. And where others valued individual ship survival, humanity was willing to sacrifice vessels to achieve tactical objectives. The Defiant led a charge directly into the heart of the swarm formation, its hull absorbing punishment that would have destroyed more elegant vessels, while its weapons systems fired everything from conventional missiles to experimental plasma charges. Captain Morrison's voice carried across the battle network, coordinating not just human vessels, but inspiring alien commanders to attempt maneuvers they would never have considered. The galaxy watched as humanity revealed its true nature in the crucible of interstellar war. They saw ships ramming enemy vessels when their weapons failed, crews manning damaged stations while their vessels burned around them, and commanders making tactical decisions that bordered on the insane but somehow worked. But the Void Swarm was learning too, adapting to human tactics with the same efficiency they'd shown against every other opponent. The battle that would determine the fate of civilization was just beginning, and both sides were discovering that their enemy was far more dangerous than they'd initially believed. In the deep of space, among the wreckage of the first engagement, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in the Void Swarm's expansion across the galaxy, they were facing opponents who didn't simply fight to win. They fought to inflict maximum damage even in defeat. The concept was alien to their collective intelligence, and it was about to cost them dearly. The real battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. The Void Swarm's adaptation period typically lasted 14 minutes. In every previous engagement across 17 star systems, this window had proven sufficient to analyze enemy tactics, modify their bioship's capabilities, and turn the tide of battle decisively in their favor. Admiral Rodriguez knew this from studying the intelligence reports, which was why he had structured humanity's battle plan around 15-minute tactical phases. Phase 2, execute now. Rodriguez's command echoed across the fleet as human vessels suddenly shifted from conventional fleet engagement to something the galaxy had never witnessed before: organized chaos. The conversion of the mining vessel Honest Work into a weapons platform had been impressive, but Captain Vasquez had saved her most innovative modification for this moment. Hidden within her ship's converted cargo holds were thousands of mining charges, each one modified with proximity sensors and maneuvering thrusters. As her ship dove toward the swarm's formation, these improvised weapons deployed like a deadly cloud of fireflies. Mining charges deployed, Captain, her weapons officer announced. Detonation pattern Alpha is armed and ready. Elena watched the tactical display as the charges spread throughout the enemy formation, their simple programming designed to seek out the largest nearby targets. The Void Swarm's bioships, having adapted to expect kinetic projectiles and energy weapons, had no protocols for dealing with thousands of small explosive devices that behaved like autonomous missiles. The detonations began in sequence, each explosion triggering others in a cascading chain reaction that tore through the swarm's tightly packed formation. But this wasn't just about destruction. It was about forcing the enemy to spread out, breaking their collective coordination and making them vulnerable to the next phase of humanity's plan. Meanwhile, Dr. Tanaka's Prometheus-class ships revealed their primary innovation. While other species built warships as single entities, humanity had designed modular vessels that could literally transform during combat. The battleship Thor's Hammer demonstrated this capability as its central hull split apart, revealing that it was actually 3 smaller vessels connected by breakaway coupling systems. Commander Lisa Park, Admiral Rodriguez's former executive officer, now commanded one of these separated sections. Separation complete, she reported as her vessel, now designated Lightning Strike, accelerated toward a cluster of swarm bioships that were attempting to regroup. Beginning independent operation, the Void Swarm's collective intelligence struggled to process what it was witnessing. Ships that split into multiple vessels violated their understanding of combat logistics. How could smaller ships be more effective than larger ones? The answer came in the form of synchronized attacks from multiple angles, overwhelming even their adaptive defenses. But the swarm was learning, and their countermeasures were becoming more sophisticated. Bioships began morphing their exterior hulls to better deflect kinetic weapons, while others developed what appeared to be organic point defense systems that could intercept incoming projectiles. This was exactly what Admiral Rodriguez had been waiting for. All ships, Phase 3 authorization granted. Deploy the packages. Across the human fleet, cargo bays opened to reveal humanity's most controversial contribution to the battle, converted civilian vessels loaded with refugees from previous swarm attacks. Not human refugees, but survivors from the 17 destroyed star systems, representing dozens of alien species. These beings had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in galactic history. The refugee ship New Hope, commanded by a joint crew of humans and Zephyrians, approached the swarm formation broadcasting standard distress signals. To the swarm's collective intelligence, it appeared to be exactly what they expected, more organic matter attempting to flee, ready for consumption and conversion. Captain Morrison watched from the Defiant as the plan unfolded. "I still think this is the craziest thing we've ever attempted," he muttered to his communications officer. His daughter, Lieutenant Morrison, monitored the encrypted channels connecting the refugee ships to the main fleet. "Dad, if this works, it's brilliant. If it doesn't, we're all dead anyway," Morrison finished grimly. "Execute the signal." The refugee ships suddenly transformed from helpless victims into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Trojan horses carrying the most dangerous cargo imaginable. Hidden within their holds weren't weapons or explosives, but small teams of human special forces equipped with technology that no civilized species would ever consider developing. Boarding parties. The concept of deliberately allowing your personnel to be captured by an enemy known for converting organic matter into extensions of itself was so horrifying that the Galactic Council had banned even theoretical research into such tactics. But humans had never been signatories to those accords, and their military philosophers had spent decades studying asymmetric warfare scenarios. Sergeant Major Elena Kozlov had volunteered to lead the first boarding team, despite having 3 children and a comfortable retirement from the Earth Marine Corps. Her team of 12 specialists wore armor that was part environmental suit, part weapons platform, and part mobile laboratory. Their mission was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. Get inside a Void Swarm bioship and find out how to kill it from within. "Remember, people," she broadcast to her team as their ship was drawn into the maw of a massive swarm vessel. "We're not trying to capture this thing. We're trying to learn how to hurt it, then get that information back to the fleet before these things figure out what we're doing." The interior of the swarm bioship defied human understanding. Corridors that pulsed like arteries, walls that responded to touch, and an atmosphere that seemed to carry whispers and languages that predated human civilization. Kozlov's team moved through this nightmare with professional efficiency, their equipment recording everything while they searched for what their scientists called critical systems. Back in the main battle, The distraction provided by the boarding operations allowed the combined fleet to reorganize. The Altarian vessels, no longer restricted to their traditional formation tactics, began implementing modified versions of human strategies. Their precision weapons, when combined with human unpredictability, proved devastatingly effective. Admiral Flowing Depth commanded the Zephyrian bioship Deep Current, a living vessel grown rather than built by his people's biotechnology. Unlike human ships with their mechanical systems, Zephyrian vessels were partnerships between crew and ship, each vessel possessing its own form of consciousness. Today, both Admiral and ship were learning new ways to fight. Deep Current reports successful integration with human tactical patterns, his communications officer announced, the translator struggling with concepts that had no Zephyrian equivalent. The ship expresses excitement at these new combat possibilities. Flowing Depth felt his vessel's enthusiasm through their neural link. For centuries, Zephyrian military doctrine had emphasized grace, efficiency, and minimal casualties. Human tactics emphasized maximum effect regardless of cost, a philosophy that appealed to his bioship's more predatory instincts. The third wave of swarm vessels entered the battle zone, these bioships noticeably different from their predecessors. Larger, more heavily armored, and sporting what appeared to be weapons systems that mirrored human designs. The swarm was not just adapting to human tactics, they were beginning to copy them. Captain Vasquez watched the new arrivals through her ship's sensors. They're learning faster than we predicted, she announced to her crew. Time for the reserves. Hidden throughout the asteroid field that bordered the battle zone, thousands of automated platforms suddenly activated. These weren't sophisticated weapons systems, but simple devices that had been mass-produced in humanity's industrial centers, essentially automated missile platforms with one-shot capability and minimal programming. The platforms launched their payloads simultaneously, creating a missile swarm that numbered in the tens of thousands. Each missile carried a conventional warhead, but their true purpose wasn't destruction, it was distraction. While the swarm bioships focused their adapted defenses on the incoming missiles, the real attack began. Dr. Tanaka's flagship, the experimental vessel Architect, had spent the early phases of the battle appearing to coordinate the human fleet from a safe distance. In reality, the ship had been slowly moving into position for its primary mission, deploying humanity's most ambitious weapon system. The Architect was not primarily a warship, but a mobile factory, its hull packed with manufacturing equipment and raw materials. As the battle raged, the ship's automated systems had been producing thousands of small, simple robots programmed with a single directive: infiltrate swarm bioships and reproduce using whatever materials they found. Nanite swarm deployment in 30 seconds, Dr. Tanaka announced to Admiral Rodriguez. Once released, we'll have no control over them. Are you certain about this? Rodriguez studied the battle display, watching human and alien ships fighting desperately against an enemy that grew stronger with each passing moment. The boarding teams had provided valuable intelligence, but the swarm was adapting faster than anticipated. Conventional warfare was failing, just as it had failed for 17-star systems. Deploy the swarm, he ordered. It's time to fight biology with biology. The nanites deployed in invisible clouds, microscopic machines designed to seek out swarm bioships, and begin the process of converting their living hulls into raw materials for replication. But these weren't just any nanites. They incorporated design principles learned from studying captured swarm technology, essentially turning the enemy's own adaptation capabilities against them. Sergeant Major Kozlov's boarding team, still deep within a swarm bioship, witnessed the nanite attack's effects firsthand. The living corridors around them began to convulse as competing biological processes fought for control of the vessel's organic systems. Command, this is Kozlov, she broadcast through her encrypted communicator. The nanites are working, but the ship is fighting back. It's trying to adapt to them just like it adapted to our weapons. We need to accelerate the process. Her team carried the equipment for exactly this contingency. Charges designed not to destroy the bioship, but to disrupt its adaptive processes long enough for the nanites to establish themselves. The placement had to be precise, hitting what their scientists theorized were the swarm's equivalent of neural centers. As Kozlov's team moved deeper into the bioship, the main battle reached its climax. The Void Swarm had adapted to human kinetic weapons, missile swarms, and even boarding tactics. Their bioships now sported armor that could deflect projectiles, point defense systems that intercepted missiles, and security protocols that made boarding nearly impossible. But They couldn't adapt to everything at once. Captain Morrison led the Defiant in a direct assault on the largest swarm vessel, a bioship the size of a small moon that appeared to be coordinating the enemy fleet. His ship's armor was scarred and blackened, his crew operating on adrenaline and determination as their vessel pushed through defensive fire that would have vaporized lesser ships. All weapons, target the command structure, Morrison ordered. We're going to cut the head off this snake. The Defiant's main guns fired continuously, pouring kinetic rounds and energy beams into the massive bioship's hull. Around them, other human vessels joined the assault, their captains understanding that this was humanity's moment to prove their worth to the galaxy. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The geode-in crystal ships, with their silicon-based intelligence, suddenly announced they had identified a pattern in the swarm's adaptation process. The crystal beings, whose thought processes operated on geological timescales, had been analyzing the entire battle as a single mathematical equation. The adaptation follows quantum mechanical principles, the geode-in fleet coordinator announced, their crystalline voice carrying across all channels. We can predict their next modification cycle and prepare countermeasures. Admiral Rodriguez immediately grasped the implications. All ships, new target priorities. The geodins are transmitting predicted adaptation patterns. Hit them where they're going to be, not where they are. The combined fleet's next volley targeted systems that the swarm bioships hadn't yet modified, striking at vulnerabilities that wouldn't exist for another few minutes. The timing was perfect, devastating the enemy ships before they could complete their defensive adaptations. But the Void Swarm had one final surprise. The massive command bioship that the Defiant had been attacking suddenly split open like a flower, revealing not a hollow interior but thousands of smaller vessels that had been hidden within its bulk. These new ships were different, sleeker, faster, and armed with weapons that appeared to be perfect hybrids of human and alien technology. They've been studying us, Admiral Rodriguez realized with growing horror. Every tactic we've used, every weapon we've deployed, they've been learning not just how to defend against them, but how to use them. The swarm's counterattack was devastating. Ships that fought like humans, but thought like a hive mind, using humanity's own tactical innovations against the creators. The combined fleet found itself facing an enemy that had absorbed the best of both human and alien warfare while retaining none of the weaknesses. Captain Vasquez watched her instruments as one of the new hybrid ships approached the honest work. Her converted mining vessel had performed magnificently throughout the battle, but she could see that conventional weapons would be useless against this new threat. Crew, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. We've got one last trick to play, but it's going to require everyone to trust me completely. We're going to show these things why you never cornered a human with nothing left to lose. Elena's final gambit was elegantly simple. If the swarm could adapt to human weapons and tactics, she would give them something they couldn't adapt to quickly enough. Pure human stubbornness combined with the kind of engineering solution that only made sense to a species crazy enough to strap rockets to everything. The honest work altered course directly toward the hybrid ship, accelerating beyond safe parameters while Elena armed the final surprise her crew had prepared, the ship's entire antimatter fuel supply, rigged as an improvised weapon that would make the old nuclear mines look like firecrackers. This is Elena Vasquez of the mining ship Honest Work, she broadcast on all frequencies. To any swarm ships receiving this transmission, here's a message from humanity. When you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And we don't forgive, we don't forget, and we sure as hell don't surrender. The explosion that followed was visible from the outer edge of the star system, a miniature star that briefly outshone the local sun. When the light faded, both the Honest Work and the swarm hybrid ship had vanished, leaving only expanding clouds of superheated gas. But Elena's sacrifice had achieved something beyond mere destruction. The explosion had created an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the swarm's coordination network, breaking the link between the remaining bioships and their collective intelligence. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, individual swarm vessels were operating independently. Admiral Rodriguez saw the opportunity immediately. All ships concentrated fire on individual targets. Don't give them time to re-establish communication. We take them one by one. The tide of battle shifted decisively. Swarm bioships that had been nearly invincible as part of a collective intelligence became merely dangerous when forced to operate alone. Human tactics, designed around independent operation and improvisation, proved devastatingly effective against enemies who had always relied on centralized coordination. As the last swarm vessels fell or retreated into the deep space between stars, the combined fleet found itself in possession of something unprecedented, a complete victory against the enemy that had consumed 17 star systems. But the cost had been enormous. Nearly 40% of the human fleet had been destroyed or severely damaged, and thousands of volunteers who had answered the galaxy's call for help would never see their homes again. Among them was Captain Elena Vasquez, whose final act had broken the enemy's coordination and turned the tide of battle. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the battered Indomitable, looking out at the aftermath of the battle. Wreckage from dozens of species drifted among the stars, testament to both the price of victory and the courage of those who had paid it. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The other swarm fleets are retreating. It appears that word of their defeat here has caused them to reconsider their expansion strategy." Rodriguez nodded slowly. Humanity had answered the galaxy's call for help, but they had done more than just win a battle. They had proven that no enemy was invincible, no matter how powerful or adaptive, as long as there were people willing to fight with everything they had. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species that had emerged from the third planet of an unremarkable star system. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through something far more valuable: the willingness to stand up for others when everything seemed hopeless. The real test, however, was yet to come. Victory in battle was only the beginning of the challenges humanity would face as the galaxy's newest military power. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, 442, the galaxy was still coming to terms with what humanity had accomplished. The Void Swarm's retreat had left power vacuums across 17 star systems, and every major civilization was repositioning itself to deal with the new reality that the violent primitives from Earth had become the galaxy's most feared military force overnight. Commander Sarah Chun, promoted to admiral after her sister's diplomatic success during the crisis, stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station. The massive orbital platform served as headquarters for what the media had dubbed the Terran Defense Initiative, but its real purpose was far more complex than simple military coordination. "Admiral," her aide announced, "the Altarian delegation has arrived for the morning briefing. They're requesting immediate audience regarding the situation in the Vega sector." Sarah nodded, still watching the construction ships assembling the station's latest addition, a shipyard complex that would dwarf anything humanity had built before. The irony wasn't lost on her that the galaxy's oldest civilizations were now funding human military expansion, desperately trying to ensure that their saviors remained on their side. The briefing room buzzed with tension as representatives from 24 species gathered around the holographic display. The Altarian delegation, led by Minister Crystalline Thought, appeared agitated despite their species' reputation for emotional control. Their crystalline bodies flickered with colors that Sarah had learned to recognize as deep anxiety. "Admiral Chun," Minister Crystalline Thought began, their translated voice carrying undertones of frustration. "The situation in the former swarm territories is becoming untenable. 3 different factions are claiming salvage rights to the abandoned bioships, and 2 of them have actually begun military action against civilian populations." Admiral Rodriguez, now serving as Sarah's senior tactical advisor, leaned forward to study the tactical display. The destroyed swarm bioships had left behind technology that was both incredibly advanced and utterly alien. Every major power in the galaxy wanted access to it, leading to conflicts that threatened to destabilize entire sectors. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The Zephyrian representative, Admiral Flowing Depth, spoke next. His aquatic form was contained in an environmental suit that allowed him to participate in meetings with air-breathing species. "We need human forces to police the salvage zones. No other military has the reputation necessary to enforce peaceful cooperation." Sarah felt the weight of the galaxy's expectations settling on her shoulders. In 6 months, humanity had gone from being dismissed as primitive warmongers to being the galaxy's de facto peacekeepers. The transition was dizzying and more than a little dangerous. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, her voice carrying the edge that had made her famous during the Void Swarm campaign. "You want humanity to risk our ships and personnel to break up fights between civilizations that have been spacefaring for millennia over technology from an enemy that tried to consume the entire galaxy?" The silence that followed was telling. Finally, The Geodan representative spoke, their silicon-based consciousness taking several minutes to formulate a response that could be translated into biological language. Admiral Chun, the mathematical certainty approaches unity that without human intervention, these conflicts will escalate into full-scale war. The probability calculations are disturbing. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now serving as humanity's chief technological advisor, activated a secondary display showing intelligence reports from across the former swarm territories. The salvaged bioships aren't just advanced technology, she explained. They're adaptive technology. Several factions have already begun trying to reverse engineer swarm biotechnology for military applications. The implications were terrifying. The Void Swarm's greatest strength had been their ability to adapt and evolve during combat. If that capability fell into the wrong hands, the galaxy could face threats even worse than the original swarm. There's something else, Dr. Tanaka continued. Our analysis of the remaining swarm fragments suggests they're not actually destroyed. They've retreated to deep space, but they're still out there. And they're learning from their defeat. Admiral Rodriguez brought up long-range sensor data that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. We're detecting strange energy signatures in the void between galaxies. The patterns match swarm biotechnology, but they're different, more complex. Sarah studied the data with growing unease. The galaxy had celebrated humanity's victory over the Void Swarm, but the real war might just be beginning. And now they expected humanity to police salvage disputes while preparing for a potential swarm return. We'll take the peacekeeping mission, she announced, causing surprised murmurs throughout the room. But we're doing it our way, with our rules, and with full support from every government represented here. The negotiations that followed established what historians would later call the Terran Accords, a framework that gave humanity unprecedented authority over military operations in the former swarm territories, in exchange for human commitment to galactic security. It was a deal that would reshape interstellar politics for generations. Captain James Morrison, now commanding the new heavy cruiser Elena's Legacy, named in honor of the mining ship captain who had sacrificed herself to break the swarm's coordination, led the first peacekeeping fleet to the Vega sector. His ship was a hybrid design that incorporated lessons learned from the Void Swarm campaign, blending human durability with alien technology in ways that would have been impossible before the war. The salvage zone around Vega 7 was a graveyard of epic proportions. Dozens of swarm bioships floated dead in space, their organic hulls slowly decaying in the vacuum, while scavenger fleets from 3 different civilizations fought over the remains. The Carillion Empire had claimed the largest specimens. The Talvashi Republic was stripping smaller bioships for their adaptive armor, and independent salvage crews were taking whatever they could carry. All vessels, this is Captain Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet, he broadcast on all frequencies. By authority of the Galactic Security Council, this salvage zone is now under human jurisdiction. All military actions will cease immediately. The response was predictably hostile. The Carillion commander, aboard a ship 3 times the size of the Elena's Legacy, transmitted back with obvious disdain. Human, your species may have gotten lucky against the swarm, but you have no authority over sovereign Carillion operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Morrison smiled grimly. The Carillions were a warrior culture that respected only strength, which made them perfect for demonstrating humanity's new capabilities. All ships, prepare for enforcement action. Rules of engagement are active. What followed was a masterclass in human military doctrine. Instead of engaging the larger Carillion ships directly, Morrison's fleet deployed swarms of small, fast attack craft that harassed the enemy vessels while avoiding direct confrontation. Meanwhile, his engineering teams deployed devices that looked like simple communication buoys, but were actually sophisticated jamming platforms. Within an hour, the Carillion ships found themselves cut off from their command structure, unable to coordinate their actions, and constantly under attack from enemies they couldn't effectively target. It was psychological warfare on a scale that most species couldn't comprehend. Carillion Commander, Morrison finally transmitted, "You're experiencing a small demonstration of human tactical doctrine. We can keep this up indefinitely, or you can withdraw to the designated neutral zone and follow salvage protocols. Your choice." The Carillion withdrawal was swift and complete, followed quickly by similar retreats from the other factions. Word spread throughout the galaxy that humanity's peacekeeping forces were not to be challenged lightly. But the The real test came when long-range sensors detected something approaching from the direction of the galactic rim, energy signatures that matched swarm biotechnology, but were far more powerful than anything seen during the previous invasion. The message arrived 3 days later, transmitted on frequencies that bypassed every known communication protocol to speak directly into the minds of every sentient being in the galaxy simultaneously. The voice was neither male nor female, organic nor mechanical, but something that existed beyond such simple categories. Children of this galaxy, we are the Void Swarm, and we have learned much from our recent encounter with your species. The humans taught us that adaptation requires more than biological modification. It requires understanding your enemy's psychology, their motivations, their fears. We return now not as conquerors, but as teachers. You will learn to serve willingly, or you will learn to suffer efficiently. The choice is yours. The transmission included star charts showing swarm fleets approaching from multiple vectors, each one larger and more sophisticated than the original invasion force. But more terrifying were the tactical analyses that accompanied the star charts. Detailed studies of every battle fought during the previous war, including complete tactical assessments of human strategy and doctrine. The swarm had learned from their defeat, but they had also learned how to counter humanity's greatest advantages. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Security Council, the weight of an entire galaxy's hopes resting on her shoulders once again. The holographic displays showed the approaching swarm fleets, their estimated time of arrival calculated in weeks rather than months. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, she began. The enemy we face this time is not the same opponent we defeated 6 months ago. They've studied our tactics, analyzed our strategies, and prepared countermeasures for everything we threw at them before. Traditional human military doctrine will not be sufficient. The assembled representatives shifted nervously. If humanity's legendary unpredictability couldn't save them, what could? However, Sarah continued, there's one thing the swarm still doesn't understand about humans. They've studied our military tactics, our technology, our strategic thinking. But they haven't figured out our greatest strength. We don't just fight for victory. We fight for each other. She activated a new display showing the current deployment of human forces throughout the galaxy. For the past 6 months, humanity has been training with every species in this alliance. We've learned your tactics, adopted your technologies, and, more importantly, we've learned to fight as one people rather than dozens of separate species. Admiral Flowing Depth leaned forward in his environmental suit. Admiral Chun, are you proposing that we face the swarm not as separate fleets, but as a single unified force? I'm proposing something the galaxy has never seen before, Sarah replied. A truly integrated fleet where human unpredictability combines with Altarian precision, where Zephyrian biotechnology merges with Geodan mathematical prediction, where every species contributes not just ships and weapons, but their entire way of thinking about warfare. The concept was revolutionary. Throughout galactic history, Alliance fleets had been collections of separate forces operating under unified command. Sarah was proposing something far more ambitious, a fleet where the tactical doctrines of dozens of species merged into something entirely new. Dr. Tanaka presented the technical specifications for what they were calling synthesis ships, vessels that combined technologies from every major civilization in ways that had never been attempted before. Human durability, Altarian energy weapons, Zephyrian biotech, Geodan computational systems, and dozens of other innovations merged into ships that were greater than the sum of their parts. The flagship of this new fleet was the Galactic Unity, a massive vessel that served as both warship and symbol of interspecies cooperation. Its human crew worked alongside Altarian tactical specialists, Zephyrian biotechnicians, and Geodan probability calculators in an integration that would have been impossible without the shared experience of the previous war. Captain Martinez, formerly the commander of a human destroyer, now found herself commanding a ship where her bridge crew represented 8 different species, each contributing their unique perspective to every tactical decision. The learning curve was steep, but the results were extraordinary. But the swarm's return brought more than just military challenges. Intelligence reports indicated that the new swarm had developed psychological warfare capabilities, broadcasting messages designed to demoralize specific species by exploiting their cultural fears and historical traumas. The defense of the Centauri system became humanity's first opportunity to demonstrate their new integrated tactics. The swarm fleet that approached was noticeably different from their predecessors, more disciplined, more strategic, and equipped with weapons that seemed specifically designed to counter human tactics. All ships, this is Admiral Chun, Sarah broadcast from the bridge of the Galactic Unity. The enemy thinks they know us because they've studied our previous battles. Today, we show them that humanity's greatest strength isn't our unpredictability. It's our ability to learn, adapt, and become something greater than we were before. The battle that followed showcased the evolution of both sides. The swarm deployed tactics that neutralized many of humanity's previous advantages, using distributed formations that prevented the kind of concentrated attacks that had worked before. Their bioships had evolved countermeasures for kinetic weapons, point defense systems that could intercept missile swarms, and psychological warfare broadcasts that targeted the specific fears of each allied species. But the integrated fleet revealed capabilities that the swarm couldn't have anticipated. When human unpredictability met Altarian precision, the result was tactical innovations that neither species could have developed alone. When Zephyrian biotechnology merged with human engineering pragmatism, they created weapons systems that adapted faster than the swarm could counter them. The turning point came when Captain Martinez's integrated crew developed a real-time solution to the swarm's psychological warfare. The Geodan probability calculators identified the mathematical patterns in the enemy broadcasts. The Altarian specialists created technical countermeasures. The Zephyrian biotechnicians developed organic filters for their living ships, and the human crew provided the psychological resilience to resist what their filters couldn't block. All ships, deploy countermeasure package Theta, Martinez announced. Let's show them that we're not just stronger together, we're smarter together. The combined fleet's counterstrike was devastating not because it was more powerful than previous human tactics, but because it was more sophisticated. The swarm found themselves facing enemies that could adapt as quickly as they could, that could predict their moves and counter them in real time, and that fought with a coordination that rivaled their own collective intelligence while retaining individual creativity. As the swarm fleet retreated once again, Admiral Chen realized that something fundamental had changed. Humanity hadn't just won another battle, they had helped create something entirely new. The alliance that had formed to fight the Void Swarm was evolving into a true galactic civilization, one where the strengths of every species enhanced the others. Standing on the bridge of the Galactic Unity, surrounded by crew members from a dozen different worlds, Sarah understood that the galaxy's future would be determined not by any single species, but by their ability to work together as one people. The Void Swarm had inadvertently created their own worst enemy, a united galaxy that was stronger than the sum of its parts. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the crisis began, Sarah felt confident about the outcome. Humanity had answered the galaxy's call for help, but in the process, they had helped create something that could protect itself. The age of isolated civilizations was ending, and the age of galactic unity was beginning. In the deep space between galaxies, the remaining swarm fleets regrouped and calculated their next move. They had underestimated humanity once, then adapted and tried again. Now they faced something they had never encountered in their expansion across the cosmos. Not just a galaxy that could defend itself, but a galaxy that was learning to think and fight as one. The Void Swarm's next adaptation would need to be their greatest yet, because they were no longer facing individual species or even military alliances. They were facing a united galaxy that had learned to combine the best of everyone into something unprecedented in cosmic history. And at the heart of that unity was the species that had answered the call when the galaxy begged for help, proving that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what you can do alone, but from what you can inspire others to become.